Hello everybody, welcome to this tutorial if you don't want to stay a beginner in Autocad forever. So basically, this is an intermediate tutorial where you will learn very useful tips to keep improving your knowledge in this interesting and nice software. This full-length video has 5 parts and you can check out the contents in the description below. Part 1. Let's have a look at the contents. Organize your working area. We can save amounts of time if things are prepared in advance. Annotative objects. By using annotative dimensions, text or blocks, you can have those kind of objects with a specific size when you print your files, even if you have different scales on your viewports in the layout. And finally, you will learn to use the zoom command instead of just scrolling the mouse wheel. This is especially useful for large files, as there are functionalities to zoom specific areas, instead of being looking for a specific element for ages. Tips for having a good organization and save time. For me, it's a very important thing, as with spending a couple of hours organizing your layouts and creating personalized templates, you will save a lot of time in the future whenever you start a new project. Save space when using 2 screens. If you have 2 screens on your computer, you can use them as your benefit when working on AutoCAD. As you may be familiar, sometimes we have to open the Layer Properties panel, or open the external References palette, as well as the Properties window. All are using space on your screen. But, however, if you have a second screen, you can place there the palettes you often need in AutoCAD. For example, here I place these ones in a way that I can use them easily all the time. And this is important, the palettes are still on the same position if you open another file or if you close the AutoCAD program and come back just tomorrow. The things will look more organized, which is more pleasant to work. Create a personalized template for your projects. Let's suppose you need to create architecture projects often and you need floor plan drawings, elevations or location plans. In addition, the scale and the paper size you use most of the time is the same. So, if that is your case, one good way to save time is create a personalized template with everything already set up. For example, look to this file where I draw this floor plan. The layers that I use here probably will be the same or similar in other projects. So, first, I can empty the workspace. Make sure that all layers are turned on and unlocked. Then go to Select All and press Delete. Now I can save this as a template, or saving as a normal DWG file would work fine. It's important that you choose a name that you will remember, for example, Project Architecture. OK, I can continue personalizing this file, for example, edit the units and precision, if I often use the same units in my projects. On the Layout tabs, I can save loads of time if I have several tabs for floor plans, elevations, sections, and so on. I can go to the Page Setup Manager to set the paper size, for example A3, and also the printer if it's the same all the time. Then I can delete the objects here by selecting all. Make sure I am on the paper space. Now, I'm going to add a new layer called Title Block. And I'm going to draw on the paper a title that can be used on all my drawings. As soon as I finish the title block, I can create a viewport in this layout. I go to the Layout tab, then I click here to insert a rectangular viewport and draw it on the paper. After, I double-click inside to switch to the model space and set up a scale for it. Okay, suppose that most of the time I use the scale of 1/50. I click on it, so I don't need to set it all the time when I start a new project. Then I can rename this layout to ground floor. I double-click on it and I type the name that I want. Then, to create similar layouts, I can right-click here, then move or copy. I select ground floor and tick create a copy. Then I click on OK, and a new tab with the same configuration was created. So, in a project architecture, I can have all these tabs for floor plans, elevations, site plans, or location plans. And when I'm happy with the template, I can save it in my computer. On Save As, click on Drawing Template and save it with the name that you like. I can add a description here also and click on OK. Basically, with this, I can save a lot of time when I start a new project. Annotation in Autocad. In the next part, we will focus how to insert annotative text and dimensions. It's simple, we just need to play a bit with scales in the workspace. The text height that we insert for our text is actually the real size that will be printed. For example, in Layout 1, I want to write text in this viewport with a text height of 0.005 meters. This is the procedure. First, check out the scale of the viewport. Double-click inside here and I can see it as 1/200. Then, switch to the Model tab. On the Home tab, go to the Annotation panel, click on this arrow and switch the first tab to Annotative, or to a style that has this icon associated. Change the scale to fit a viewport scale. I click on 1/200. Create a single line text here. The command is up there. Click for the base point, and when you are prompted to insert the height, it says here, specify paper height. I am going to type 0.005 because in this drawing I'm using meters as units. Type the text and click in a different place. Then switch again to Layout 1 and here you have the text. If you print it and check it with a rule, it has to measure 5 millimeters. Now, let's go to another Layout tab, this one. This time I want to add a text to the viewport where I have the door. The scale here is 1/16. So, going back to the model space, let's find the door. I'm going to switch the scale to 1/16 and let's draw another text. This time, for the paper height, I type 0.01, 1 centimeter. Finally, I type the text. When I switch again to the Details tab, I can see the text there. Annotative Dimensions. This uses a similar logic as Annotative Text. We want to add this dimension line with the same 5 mm of text height on the paper. Go back to the model space. First, change the current layer to Dimensions. Then click on the arrow at the annotation panel, and then click on the second tab, which is the one for dimensions. Choose an annotative style, this one. Now we have to do a different step. We should edit the dimension style first. Click on this button. In this window, choose Annotative Meters and click on Modify. Here I go to the label text and specify 0.005 for the text height. Then in Symbols and Arrows, I can put the same measurement for the arrow line. Finally, I click on OK and close. To add the dimension line, I change the scale again to fit the viewport scale of 1/200. Click on this icon to draw a dimension line, and I'm going to place it here. When I finish, I can go to the Layout tab, and here you have the dimension line. Okay, it's too light in a white paper. That's no problem. I can click inside the viewport, go to the Layer Properties, and then in Dimensions, I can change the viewport color to a darker one. Now it's much better. Annotative blocks. Now let's check out how we can create annotative blocks. They can be useful for some kind of projects where we add symbols that can represent elements. For example, here, suppose we want to add a socket to this project. As it's a small element to be seen in the plan, we usually represent it as a symbol with a fixed size in order to be easily seen in drawings with different scales. In the example here, this socket has 5 mm of diameter in the paper. Back on the model space, I'm going to zoom in the object. And the first thing, I have to confirm it has the size that I desire. Oh, and don't forget to set the scale as 1/1, because we are drawing an annotative element. Otherwise, the block will be automatically scaled after being created, and I don't think that's what we want. So, as I want this distance as 5 mm, you can see that it's not. I have to use the command scale. So I type SC, select all the objects, press Enter. I can choose this one as the base point, and then instead of a scale factor, I have to choose a reference. Then I select 2 points for my reference line, and then I specify the new length as 5 mm. Oh, and just to let you know, in this project the unit is millimeter. Now that our symbol is in the correct scale, I'm going to convert it to a block. I select all the objects and make sure they are on the layer 0. To create a block, I can use the alias B to open the block definition to create a block. I type the name for the block, for example, socket. Then we need to tick this box that says Annotative. I click on OK, and I can choose the base point, and the block is finally done. The next step is to insert the block on the drawing, but in the scale of one of the viewports. It can be 1/50, 1/100, or 1/200. As you can see there. I decide to choose 1/50. So, on the model space, change the scale here to 1/50. Go to Insert Block, choose the socket, and I'm going to place it where it belongs. I hold this endpoint and put it there. If you go again to the layout mode, you can see it on the viewport with scale 1/50. So until here everything is correct. Then how can I add the other scales? If I access the properties of this block, I can see under Miscellaneous that this object is annotative, along with the annotative scale. However, I can easily add more scales here by just clicking on the button at the right. This is the annotation object scale, and I click on Add to add more scales. I choose 1 per 100 and 1 per 200 in this list. I click in OK, and here you have them. Then it should be done. So let's change the scale here, and you can see that the object is resized. What happened is that this block has now 3 different scales. When you look at the viewports, the socket symbol has exactly the same size in all of them. And then, if you print, you will notice that the symbol measures exactly 5 mm of width. Going back to the model space and select the socket, you can see the 3 scales when you have this button on the status bar turned on. Then let's put it just in another color to be easier to distinguish. Zoom. Now I'm going to talk a bit about zooming in Autocad. As you know, the most simple way of zooming, and the most common one, is to scroll the mouse wheel to reach the different parts of our project. However, for large projects, this can be a bit annoying to try to find specific areas. For that reason, there is the command zoom. Let's have a look at it. I type Z and press enter. Then, if you look at the command bar, you can see several ways to use zoom. The option by default is drawing a window on the workspace. For example, if I want to show the staircase division here, I draw a window covering that part, and here is the result. So, I find this especially useful when I want to focus something specific, as the zooming is more precise in this area. Another way of using zoom is using the option All. This sets the zoom to cover all the drawing in this file, including the position of the UCS coordinates in the corner here. Then, a similar option is the Zoom Extends. Very useful, by the way. I use it quite a lot. It shows all the objects covering the full screen. Here, the difference regarding Zoom All is that the position of the UCS coordinates can be hidden. If I click on Center, I pick a point to be placed in the center of the screen. Then, I specify the zoom height by drawing a line here. Simple. Now I'm going to show you something useful for larger projects. In this file, you can see all these drawings of a single architecture project. In this case, it's an exposition center. There are floor plans, sections, elevations, site plans, and so on. On these controls at the top left corner, click on this one that says Stop, and here you can switch to a different view of the workspace. However, the ones here are useful when I have 3D drawings. Look that I can't see anything interesting when I switch to the left or right views. This is because everything in this project is 2-dimensional and was created in the top plane. On the view cube, you can understand a bit better the location of the views by default, especially when you click in a corner to switch to an isometric view. Okay, but what I want to do now is actually create a custom view to show up a specific part. Let's go to one of the floor plans located here, and to be more precise, I zoom with Window. Okay, now it's better. Then I go again to Top, and this time I click on View Manager. I'm going to create a new view here on New. And first I need to choose a name. It's going to be Esquema de Instalaciones Sanitarias. Yes, it's Spanish, but it means literally Sanitary Facility Scheme. Then I can put it into a category. It's empty, so I can create a new one. Let's name it Floor Plans. The view type, I keep it still, I don't change it. For the boundary, I choose the current display and click OK to close. Here OK again. And then I go back to top, and on custom views, I choose the one I just created, and you can see it zooming automatically. Okay, it's true that this floor plan was not very difficult to find. However, if you are working in a huge project with loads of drawings, sometimes you can stay looking for a specific detail for ages, like those books where you need to find Waldo. So, now we want to zoom up to these objects. But this time let's do it a bit different. Go again to the View Manager, create a new view called Detail 1 and put it into a new category, Details. And in Boundary this time I'm going to define a view window. I click in this button, then I search for the part that I want. I told you, it's hard. Where are they? Ah, here. So, make a window in the place where I want to zoom. I press Enter when I'm ready, and you can see a preview on the View Manager. I click OK to confirm it and close. So, for the next time I want to go to the Detail 1, it's much faster. Charan! Part 2. Layout tabs extra tips. When we set a viewport to show a specific drawing with a specific scale, we realize that in a small distraction we scroll the mouse wheel and it messes up all the scale. And then I have to go to the scale list and click again, in this case in 1/150. However, there is a very useful tool here. I can lock the viewport by clicking on this icon. Now, even I am in the model space, I can zoom or move in the same way as I was in the paper mode. By the way, I can still draw or erase objects inside the viewport. So I just recommend you to lock all the viewports when you don't want to change them anymore. Write text and draw the title block on the paper. When you need to add text to your papers, just draw it directly in the paper mode. I mean outside of any viewport. It's easier and more practical. First, it's text that we don't want to model, as it's only used for annotation. Second, the size that we specify is the paper height. In this case 5 mm, and I don't have to scale it like in a model space. Much easier. The same applies for the title block. Just draw it on the paper. You can start drawing the borders, then the text using the paper height. In this case, after placing the first single line text, I want 4 of these with the same spacing. I can use here the command copy, then the option array. I type 4, and finally you can click again to confirm the position or insert a specific distance between objects. And then just change the names to the right ones. Okay, I can take the opportunity to explain to insert an image to the layout. For example, if you want to add a logo of your company there, it's quite simple. Go to the Insert tab, then click on Attach and select an image to import to this file. I select the Cad in Black logo, for example, just to show you how it works. We can insert the coordinates of the insertion point or specify it on screen, and that's what I'm going to do. Click on OK, place the start point. I can click around here. Then it looks like that the image is a bit large, but that's fine. Just press Enter for now, as we can scale it after with a reference. Use the command Scale. Select the image. Click for the base point. Choose the option Reference at the command bar, and then choose 2 points of a reference line to resize it. And this time I will not insert any length, because I don't know it. I just move the cursor in this direction and you can see a dynamic preview of the logo. As soon as it looks great, I can click to place it there. So simple, isn't it? Yes, let's continue. Now we are going to learn to add more viewports on the same paper. Usually the purpose of doing this is to show different drawings or a specific detail that we want to show on a smaller scale. Let's go to the Layout tab on the ribbon. Here we will create a new viewport by clicking in this icon. And there are 3 ways: rectangular, polygonal and object. Let's go for rectangular. So I simply draw a rectangle here. Then I double click inside it to switch to the model space. This time we will use a custom view that we created in the previous chapter. I click on top, go to Custom Model View and choose Detail 1. And look how useful this can be, not need to search for that part, so easy. Next, I go to the scale list and I need to choose one. 1/50. And the reason that I decided to use this scale is because 1/50 is the same as 0.02, which is relatively close to the value that I've got here. And you can see that the drawing didn't change that much. Double click to switch to the paper space and readjust the viewport by clicking on the grips there. And don't forget to lock the viewport to not move it again. After, I can copy this text and place it below our new viewport. Select the text. I'm going to use this endpoint as my base point, and then click in this corner for the second point to keep the same spacing towards the viewport. And rename it with the correct text. Put also the scale of 1/50. Then let's draw a circle here. The radius doesn't need to be precise. On the Layout tab, choose now the option to create a viewport from an existing object, this one. Then click on the circle to convert it to a viewport. And of course, this option only works for enclosed areas. Then suppose what I want here is to zoom this specific part. Move the circle to a specific layer if you want, or put the object just in a specific color. And then I can draw a small circle in the same place of the floor plan to indicate that this area belongs there. And if you want at the end, you can connect it with lines. Other drafting techniques. In this chapter, I'm going to talk about drawing tips, and I will start with the grid and snap modes. Grid and snap mode can be useful when we have to make detailed drawings, especially when they have regular shapes. Let's have a look at them. The first icon at the status bar enables the grid, as you can see here. Try it on your computer. However, you will probably notice that it looks darker than here if you have the default colors. For me, they are a bit hard to see, and that's why I prefer to change them. But okay, this I will explain to you at the end of this chapter. For now, let's zoom a bit and activate the drawing command For example, line. You can see that the cursor doesn't snap to any point, because the snap mode is off. Let's turn it on. And now yes, you can click on an intersection of the grid line. So it's easily understandable that these tools work together, and there is no point to turn on the snap mode if your grid mode is off. Now, I'm going to click on an intersection of two major lines, and by moving the cursor, you can understand what is the length between 2 points of the grid. It's 10, and the distance of two major lines is 50, because it's equal to 5 minor lines. So, as you can see, this is quite simple. Now, have a look to this drawing. We can easily guess the distance between some points, if they are not that far away. For example, this distance is 100 millimeters, and the width of the rectangle is 200. Because there are 4 big squares, 5, 10, 15, 20, you can just count them. So, to draw that rectangle with the grid is actually easy. This is the first corner, then the opposite will be 4 large squares to the left and one above the line at the bottom, so click there. You can zoom a bit to make sure that you click on the correct point, it's better. Okay, now let's learn to edit the snap and grid spacing. Click on Snap Settings to modify those values. It's in the first tab of the Drawing Settings window, here. Of course, to snap only in every point of the grid, the snap spacing and grid spacing must match. Don't forget this. And the values that I have now are the settings that I used in the previous example. Suppose we set 5 for snap spacing, but leave 10 mm for the grid spacing. The result is this, and it can actually be a good method, because with the same grid I can have the center of each square as an extra point to snap, as you can see. To have a different x and y spacing, I need to uncheck equal x and y spacing, and then I set the values. Here I have 5 mm for y distance and 10 for the x distance. I can also change the length of the major lines. The higher the value, the easier to measure larger distances. If I'm zooming out the workspace, at one point the grid resizes, in a way that the lines won't get that close. We couldn't see anything if that would happen. This means that at this moment the spacing here is not what we put on the settings. Be careful, don't draw anything now. Always draw in the maximum zoom. And in the case that you want to draw bigger objects, simple, just change the spacing settings to bigger values. If I like to have the workspace more organized and I want a point to be in the corner of an intersection when I zoom out a lot, like where I am now, simple. Place the cursor there, in the corner, and zoom in slowly, keeping the cursor in the same position. When the grid doesn't resize anymore, it means that the grid is now resized correctly. Change the grid colors. As I told you previously, the default grid colors are dark. But I understand their point. We don't want the workspace to look a mess with the grid on, especially when we have lots of layers with different colors, like in the example here. But I think that putting the grid a bit lighter, it doesn't interfere that much. So let's learn to do it. To edit the colors, we have to access the Options menu. Then I go to the Display tab and click on this button that says Colors. Here we can change the color of each element on the workspace. You can see a big list here. Also, they are grouped by context. It's the list on the left. Now it says that we are at the 2D model space. So I am happy with most of the Autocad interface colors. So I don't need to change them, except the grid, which is a bit dark for me. To change a color, click on the element, go to color, choose one from the list or click here to pick a different one. Let's say I want it a bit green, but in a gray style. I keep the cursor here, and then I drag this rectangle to choose the proper color a bit up to be more visible, and click on OK. It's done. Now I need to change the grid minor lines. To do it, I choose the same color. Then I click again and pick up a color so the cursor will be in the same position. This is good if you just want to change the color a bit and to not look very different. So I want to put the selector a bit darker, then click on OK. I apply and close the window, and now it looks more visible. So you can just choose a color that will be comfortable for you. Change the position of the UCS. Look to this situation. Here I want to draw these objects in reference to the diagonal wall. It would be hard to draw them accurately if I use the UCS coordinates on the position by default. You can see that while I'm trying to draw that line, I don't have any reference to draw it perpendicular to the wall. But no problem, because I can make the things easier by just rotating the UCS coordinates. I go to the icon, click on it, I place it in this corner, and then, clicking on the x-axis, I align it to this diagonal line. Then I can switch to ortho mode, and you can see that I can easily draw vertical and horizontal lines according to the new UCS position. Also, if I want to insert a block now, it automatically rotates. And the same happens with the grid. Then to restore the original UCS, which is the WCS, World Coordinate System, just click on the icon and then select World. Now let's have a look at the shortcut menu, the one that we can open with the right button of the mouse. Actually, most of these functions are icons located on panels in the ribbon, but sometimes it can be easier for us doing this way. Now I will make a quick introduction of what you can find here. The first option over there repeats the last command used. It's an alternative way of just pressing enter when we don't have any command active. I actually prefer to just press enter, it's much easier. Then there is a list of the last commands used. On the clipboard we find the basic tools to copy, move or cut objects to a different file. And this still works by just pressing the classic shortcuts, like the Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V and so on. For example, I will copy these objects, press enter, then I go to a different file, and just click on paste. And they will be copied exactly in the same position as they were before. But if you wanted to copy this door straight, you can use the method that I just showed you previously, by moving the UCS coordinates to the corner, then rotate the x-axis in line of the edge of the door, and repeat the process. Press Ctrl-C, and then paste it in the other drawing. And now it's straight. Back in the shortcut menu, I want to show you some options that I use quite often, like Isolate Objects. I'm going to select this part, and then I click on Isolate Objects, and you notice that all the other drawings disappeared. To revert these changes, just click on End Object Isolation. In the same submenu, there is also Hide Objects, which will be the opposite. If there are parts that you are not using at the moment, you can hide them temporarily. A bit down in the list, there are the options to use the pen, zoom, or the steering wheels. Then there is the Quick Select, Quick Calculator, also available on the ribbon, and the Options menu. Also, don't forget that when you select objects, That menu is different and depends the kind of object that you select. For example, in a block, you get options to edit a block, reset a block if you modify it, or edit a block in place if you don't want to open the block editor. Then you find the basic commands to modify objects, so it's also possible to access them from this list. Then there is the draw order, and this one I use a lot. When you create a new layer, Autocad puts the objects of that layer above everything that was created before. For example, here I created the layer for the dimension lines after the layer for the walls. And because I don't like these extension lines above the walls, let's sweep the order. And for that I need to select all the objects of the layer dimensions. And I can do it from the quick select, choose the layer DLI and click OK. Now that all the dimensions are selected, I can go again to the right-click menu, go to Draw Order and choose Send to Back. And look that the walls are now visible when they overlap dimensions. Another tool I sometimes use is Group Objects. Let's say I want to group this floor plan, but without the dimensions. Turn off the layer DLI. Then I select everything and from the menu choose Group. And I could move or copy this house elevation to a different place. The option Select Similar is also very useful. By clicking on a type of object, for example a dimension line, you can see that it selects all the remaining dimensions, but yes, they must be located in the same layer. For example, in this situation, the large dimension is not selected. Object Snap Overrides has a useful tool that not a lot of people know. Suppose we are drawing a line here, and we want to connect it perpendicular with the diagonal line below. As you see, it's only showing up the midpoint and the end point. But if I click with the right button, I can see Object Snap Overrides, I go there, and I can choose a different mode. In this case I click on perpendicular, and now you can see the symbol appearing. Just click on it to make those lines orthogonal to each other. You can try the other modes by yourself, for example nearest, or on the top you can create a temporary track point or choose the middle between 2 points. This is how it works. I choose 2 points and it selects the middle distance between them. So just explore the other modes, maybe you find some useful for you as long as the other options from the shortcut menu. Part 3. Attributes in blocks. To define an attribute, we can either click on this icon at the Home tab, or in the Insert tab, you can find it located in the Block Definition panel. Click on it, and the Attribute Definition window shows up on the screen. Then there are 3 main fields to fill for each attribute. First, we insert the tag, which is just used to indicate the position of the attribute. This text appears in capitals, and you can't put spaces between characters, so remember this. Below, you should type the prompt sentence. For example, if I want to fill with the name of the client, I type client name. On default, I will put a value that will appear anytime that I insert that attribute. Personally, I prefer to keep this empty, except it's an attribute that uses the same text often. However, let's insert a value here. On the text settings, it has the justification on the left and standard text style. Below on text height, I specified the same as the existing text. It was 3, and remember it's the paper height, so I don't put a tick in Annotative. We click in OK, and we can specify the start point for our attribute. So now I can draw the next one, which I can repeat the process, or I could use a quicker way. With the command copy, I use the option array with 4 number of items. It's exactly what I did before. Then click here approximately to be in line with the text at the left. There are no object snap points for text objects. However, if you want to put the text perfectly in line, there are ways to do it. But it's something that we will learn later, don't worry. Then double click on the second tag and this window shows up to modify the information that I had given before. When you are ready, click OK and do the same for the others. For the scale and date, I do the same in the attribute definition. But here the text height will be 2. Click OK and place the attribute where I want to show the scale. Then copy it below to make an attribute for the date and change the values. Okay, now that the attributes are completed, it's time to create a block with the title block and the attributes. First, I need to switch to the layer 0. Now I'm going to create a block. And first, I have to choose the name for the title. I put title block A2, so I know I have to use this block in an A2 paper. You can also create another title blocks for different papers. Click OK to select the objects, and now I have 2 options. Or I select all the attributes first and then the remaining objects, or the inverse, first the normal objects and after the attributes. I decide to select first the attributes, but I still need to click on them in the order that I want to display. This is important. Now I select the remaining objects. I can cover all with a selection area, and don't worry that the attributes are inside because they are already selected. I press Enter to return to the block definition window, click OK, and the window to edit the attributes is now on the screen. And you can see them on the order that I choose. And now have a look to the window. On the left is what I inserted for the prompts. The values at the right are what I set for the default values. As you remember, I put some values there, but actually it was for you to have a look at the appearance of this. Actually, it would be better to not write anything on the default, because now I need to erase those blanks. So let's fill with the content that I need. Click OK, and you can see how the attributes are automatically displayed on the block. Then, in this case, the drawing name is too long to fit on the box. So if I double click on the block itself, I can edit each attribute. And in this window, you can see that aside from the attribute values, I can also change text options and properties. Just look at the tabs here above. So I changed the drawing to ground floor plan. Now let's have a look at this example. In this level point, I want to put an attribute to indicate the elevation of a specific area of a plan. But this time I want to place the text at a certain position, and for that we have to draw temporary lines as reference. So I'm going to offset this line above to 100 millimeters. Then let's add an attribute here. Click on the icon. Then on the blanks, put the tag level. Next, I'm going to type insert level for the prompt. And don't write anything on default. Just leave it empty. On the text settings, change the justification to right. You will see after. And set the text height as 300. I do this because now we are at a model space and it will be basically the triple of the distance between both horizontal lines. Click on OK. Now I'm going to put the attribute in this corner and you can see it aligned to the right, like this exactly. So you can notice when you do this way, you put the text at a precise location. So I can now delete the extra line, and I'm going to use the command hatch. Let's see if you remember it. Type H and press enter. Then I go up here and select solid. Change the color of the hatch to by block, as we are going to make a block of all these objects, to later edit the color of the hatch if we need. Then click on these 2/4 parts of the circle. Press enter to finish. Now I'm going to convert this to a block. Click on create a block. Then type the name, level point, select the objects. First I click on the attribute, then on the remaining objects. Press enter again. Click on OK. Select the base point, and finally it asks to edit the only attribute that this block has. I type +1.2 and click on OK, and you can see the block updated. Now I can change to the layer that I want, and the colors of the hatch objects, as I set before as by block, they get the colors that I specify here at the object color. How to edit an attribute in a block? When I double click in a block reference, I can edit their attributes, but be aware that this only applies to that object. So on text options, I change the height to 200, and you can see that it updates the size of the level number. However, if I insert another block reference of the same block, let's put here 0 for example, you can see that it still keeps the previous text height. So, how could I edit the attribute inside the block? In a way, it would update all the block references. It's like this. Go to the block attribute manager, which is the icon located here. Then, in this window, I need to select the attribute I want to modify. And as you can see, they are grouped by blocks. I click on the level attribute, go to edit, and any change that I made here applies to all the block references. So if I change the text to 200, you can see that it applies to all. Dynamic blocks. This is a block reference of a window projection in a floor plan. If I click on it, I can see the base point along with other groups created by me. The one at the right is an added parameter to change the length. It's very useful because now I just type the value for a new length. When I double click to edit the block, I can see that there is this symbol here, meaning that the block is dynamic. In other words, it has parameters with actions associated. So let's start from the beginning. For adding a new parameter, we need to use the block authorities palette. If you can't see it on the screen, you can enable it in this button here. I'm going to use a linear parameter for the distance. I click in the start point and then on the end point. This distance by itself doesn't do anything because I need to set an action. And as what I want to do here is stretching the window, I'm going to use stretch. First, I need to select the parameter, then the action point, this one. I specify the stretch frame, it's the area that I want to stretch. Then I select the objects, press enter, I close the block and save changes, and now you can see how I can change the length. It's simple. So it's recommended to select the action on the other side of the base point, otherwise they would overlap each other. Let's go to the next example. Here I'm going to show you another parameter, flip, and that's what I have in this door. I can flip the opening by just clicking in these buttons. Open the block editor, and then I'm going to start with this one in the middle. I click on flip, and the reflection line will be in the middle distance between frames. I could draw a line here to use the midpoint, but let's do something we learned earlier in this tutorial. Click with the right button, go to Object Snap Overrides, and then click on Meet between 2 points. Select these two, and then I can make the vertical reflection line here. Then I need an action to that parameter. And instead of going to the Actions tab, I can also click in the exclamation point to add an action. And then for the objects, I select the line and the arc. So if I close the block editor, I can see the result. Then let's add another flip, but this time to switch the door down here. This time I go to Action, I click on Flip, select the flip state 2. This time I need to select everything. And if I close the block, you can see I have a new flip to the other side. In this door, there is also a stretch action to adapt the frame to different wall widths. So let's add it. It's again the linear parameter. Choose the 2 points of the dimension line, then double click in this yellow symbol. Remember that when it shows up on the screen, it means there are no actions associated yet. There are 4 possibilities to linear parameters, so we add the stretch, then select the stretch frame, and I need to cover all this part, and for the objects, I select those here, and also at the left. I press enter, then I have to close the block editor, and you can see again the result of stretching a part of a block. The parameter alignment. This parameter can be useful to align a block along a line. For example, for electrical circuits, we want to align a socket automatically along a polyline. So let's see, and this parameter is actually very simple. We click on alignment, set the base point of alignment, which I want it to be here, in the middle. Then I need the direction of alignment, which is along this direction. Close the block to return to the main workspace. Then select the socket. Click on the alignment point, which is easy to recognize as it has a different shape, and move it to the polyline. Simple. Then there are some important tips you should know. I recommend you to have the mode nearest active, so you can put the block in any position of the polyline. If your object snap is off, the alignment will not work. Another tip is that the alignment will be to the other side of where you have the pointer. For example, if the pointer is just a little bit above the line, the alignment faces down. However, if you have the pointer down the line, the block is placed on the other side. I know that this is a bit tricky, but for that reason, we can also add flip states to the block to switch the direction easily. But as we all already know, the things are never perfect in Autocad. At least that's our beliefs, especially when the things are not working as we desire. For example, if you have text in a block and then you want to align it here, it's alright. But if it aligns to the opposite direction, you notice that everything is flipped over, including the text. So in the case you want this socket to face the inner side of the polyline, the best is to place the block in this side and then use the grip to flip the direction. Yes, but make sure you don't have the system variable to mirror the text active. I mean, if you type mirror text in the command line, you can switch to 1 and then the text is also mirrored. Basically, if you don't want to mirror text, keep it 0. Visibility. This parameter is used to make variations on objects in a block and then display a list with different options to choose. I show to you this socket as an example. So I'm going to convert a switch to a block. And first I'm going to draw a line here to use the midpoint as my base point. Then I turn on the command block, choose a name, select the objects except the line I have just drawn, and finally specify the base point. So I converted the switch to a block. Now let's go to the block editor. And here I'm going to add a visibility parameter. I can just put it wherever I want, because its location doesn't affect the performance of the objects. Also, the visibility works with visibility states, which is a bit different than for the other parameters. If I double click here, it opens the window to manage those states. I can also access it in this button at the visibility panel. Let's continue. First, I can rename this current visibility state, type socket1. Then, let's create a new one, socket2, and click on OK. Close the window. You can see that here I have the socket2, and as this state has exactly these objects, I leave it unchanged. Then I switch to socket1, and here I don't want to show up the number 2. Click on it, and then press this button at the visibility panel to make it invisible. Very good. Now I go back to the visibility state window and add a new state called socket3. If you look at the bottom of this window, there are 3 options here. And now I tick the third option, and this new state will be a copy of the current status, which is socket1. So I'm going to add a hatch object here, and first I draw a line. Then I activate hatch and fill all this area. I also want to change the pattern to a solid color and then fill the area here. And now that I am done, I press enter. Important, when you draw new objects here, they only go to the current status. For example, if I switch to the socket1 or socket2, you can see that there is no hatch there. On the visibility panel, there is an icon, it's actually a system variable, to control how the invisible objects are shown. In the current mode, the invisible objects are transparent, so you can notice them. However, if you click in that button, you choose to not see them. Part 4. In this part, we will learn to use the Design Center, as well as the tool and block palettes. They are located in the View tab. Finally, in the last minutes, we will have a look at the external references, a very useful feature in Autocad. Now we can start. The Design Center. In Autocad, we can import content from different drawings. Let's go to the View tab, and at the Palettes panel, we can find this icon, the Design Center. I click on it, and on this window, we can browse for a specific DWG file. I'm going to choose this one, and then you can see that we can have access to blocks, dimension lines, layers, line types, and other elements that are located on that file. If I want to insert a specific block from this file, I click here, then select, for example, Table 1, double-click on it, and this window appears. Now, if I click on OK, we insert the block exactly in the way that it was created. But we can use few insertion options. Let's see them. In the middle section, we have the scale, and is set by default as 1 for each X, Y, and Z axis. If I click on Specify on Screen, you will see what happens. Autocad prompts to specify the X scale factor. I'm going to type 2, and then it asks to enter a Y scale factor. And have in mind, if it's a different value than X, that would deform the table. So, as I don't want it to happen, I have to use the same X scale factor, 2. I press Enter to place the block, and as you can notice, all the dimensions are now double size. Back on the Insert window, I can click on Uniform Scale to insert just a scale factor for all the axes. So you have a step less. Another insertion option is Rotation. Put a tick on there, click on OK, then this time I put for the scale 0.5, and then I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees on this direction. So it's simple, as you see. Finally, there is also another and important information here. The block unit, which for this one is set as millimeters, and I cannot change it, as you can see. Actually, the unit is defined when we create the block, here on the bottom left corner. I think a lot of people don't notice that, even usually it's not a problem. But what's important to know is the unit that appears here by default is what is set on the unit properties for the insertion content. You might remember this when I explained in the tutorial for beginners when we insert content from a different file, and that's exactly what we are doing here. Let's now have a look on the next example. I'm going to change to this file where I have several door blocks. I'm going to choose door 1, and this time you can see that the block unit is set to inches. As in my current file the unit is millimeters, the block has to be converted from inches to millimeters, and the conversion factor is automatically calculated here. It says 25, but is it correct? Do you remember, if you look at the tables, 1 inch is 25.4 millimeters. But it shows only 25. Why? Because on the unit properties, I have this option set to not show decimals. If I change it to 2 decimals or 1 decimal, now you can see 25.4. It could be 25.40, but it doesn't show the zeros at the right of the comma, because there's no need. Since AutoCAD 2020, there is a new palette to insert a block from other drawings. It can be quite useful. I click on it, then I need to click on these ellipses to find a different file. And here you have the blocks within that file. This is a nice feature. It's faster to search for blocks, and also you have in this panel tabs that group the blocks from other drawings, recent blocks that you used, and the blocks from the current drawing. It also indicates which blocks are dynamic. Now to insert a block, it's easy. Double-click in the one that I want, go to the drawing, and it just asks to specify the insertion point. You can see here that is the only option ticked. The disadvantage regarding the design center is that I cannot see the unit that the block was created. Anyway, I don't think that's a big issue, as I can always check it out on its properties, and if you notice that it's not in the right size when you insert a block, you can simply apply a scale to it. So, among the elements on the design center, we can also add layers from other drawings. It's very simple. If I want a layer from this file, Centro de Exposiciones, I just need to double-click on the one that I want and it's automatically added. You can see the new layer Arcos Vista. To import more than one layer, I select them, and this time I do not double-click. It doesn't work this way. Instead, I click with the right button and choose Add Layers. Here you have them, and remember that in the layer properties, the layers are displayed in alphabetical order. For dimension styles, it works the same way, simple. So you can play around this with the other elements, and you will notice that they work all similar. Tool palettes. It's this icon here. This is another way to insert content from different drawings. I think this is something really useful in AutoCAD. Basically, it's a kind of library that organizes items into these different tabs, which are called palettes. All these items here come by default in AutoCAD, and they are located in sample files. If you are curious, those sample files can be found on the AutoCAD folder. Go to Samples, and all the default DWG files are there. There are dynamic blocks, normal blocks, hatches, or other kind of objects. Let's open one of these files, for example, Home Space Planner, and you can see that there are just blocks here. And actually, we can get advantage of these files, because we can use those blocks in our projects without the need to search for blocks on the internet. These are also more sample files. Now let's go back. On each palette here you can find specific elements. Blocks for architectural, annotation, mechanical, electrical, civil, and so on. To insert an element or object, just click on it and click again in the drawing. It's very simple. The only thing is that you don't have insertion options here. It uses the ones by default. You can also insert a hatch. For example, I click in this dark red and place it there, like this. But be aware, this doesn't create any layer. If you look at the hatch tab on the ribbon, it just uses this specific color for this object. And it went to the layer walls, as it's the current layer. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to organize these palettes. If you click here with the right button, you can use the palette group that you desire. For example, there are the parametrics here. If I click in Civil, it shows this one, and so on. Look that there are also tables, or even visual styles. Then these palettes can be customized. If you click with the right button, and then go to Customize Palettes. On the left side you can see all the palettes, and on the right the palette groups. Each group contains how many palettes as we want. Some just have one palette, and others, like the annotation design, have several palettes. As you guess, all these can be customized. Just click and hold in one palette, for example modeling, and drag it to a palette group. I put it on annotation and design and at the top. The order here indicates how the palettes are sorted on the Tool Palettes main window. Okay, but actually I don't want this palette here. So to remove a palette, click with the right button and click on Remove. Now, I want to show you how to add new palettes, for example, with blocks from other drawings. What we need to do is to use the Design Center to bring content to the tool palettes. So I have the Design Center window here, and I want to add the blocks from the files that are in this folder. If I click in any file with the right button, there is an option here to create a tool palette. Click, then wait a few seconds until the palette is generated, and as you see, it goes directly to the top of your current group, and also only the blocks were generated. Then I'm going to repeat the process for the other files: doors, home assembles, kitchen, and windows. All are generated and placed above. Back on Customize Palettes window, I'm going to add a new group named My Blocks. And then move the new palettes to this newly created group. When ready, I can also remove these palettes from the group annotation and design as they are not needed anymore. Select the palette and press Delete. Finally, switch to My Blocks, and here you have the palettes with this nice organization. So you can see, at least in my opinion, this is a very practical way to use blocks in your projects. And it's also possible to choose a specific block from one of your lost files and put it directly on the palette. Now, I encourage you to create your own palettes, and you will see how organized your projects become. External references. I open a new file, and here I want to attach a reference to a file that it was previously given to me. This one, Project Architecture. Imagine that I am a structural engineer and I want to draw here the structural plan. Or I could be an electrical technician and I want to draw electrical circuits there. So, on my new file, I go to the Insert tab, and on the Reference panel, this is the panel that controls references, click on this arrow to open the External Reference palette. An alternative way is typing the command xref, or external reference. At the moment, I just have here the current file. You can recognize it by the DWG icon. Then, if I switch to Project Architecture, now you can see that the current file changes. It also has an additional element, which is an attached image. The details of each file you can check out on this part below. This is a JPG file. That image is the one that I added to the title block on the Layout tabs here. Then, if I click on Cat in Black logo with the right button, I can detach the image in Unload, and you can see it disappearing. But I don't want to do it, so I click again with the right button and click on Reload. So, to attach here the file Project Architecture, I go to this icon, then I click on Attach DWG, select the file. In this window, I click again on OK or specify the insertion options that I want. At this moment, I'm not going to scale the reference, the option specified on screen is not ticked, and I specify the insertion point. If you remove the tick on this box, the base point will be on the coordinates specified below, and if it's 0, 0, 0, the base point will be on the origin. Click on OK and place now the base point where I want. I'm going to put the coordinates in the origin, so I type 0, press Tab, 0 again, and press Enter. So here you can see the reference to the project architecture, and it's easy to recognize because it's darker than usual. At the file references list, you can see the new attached file, the DWG, the project architecture, and the image that was in that project is also shown here. And it appears with the name of the file first, and then the name of the image, the CAD in Black logo. However, sometimes for any reason, some of the files attached might not load because the program can't find the file. And even if you click on reload, nothing happens. So the solution for this is clicking on change path and search for the file on your computer. How to edit an external reference in a drawing. If I click on the image, you realize that everything is selected. I cannot select a line by line or an object by object. Also, on the ribbon, it shows up a new tab called External Reference. Here I can create a clipping boundary on a part of the drawing and other options. Example, let's say in this project I only want to show the floor plan below. I click on Create Clipping Boundary, then I select Rectangular, draw a rectangle around the drawing, and all the other parts of the file just disappeared. I can also invert the part of the drawing that is showing by clicking on this grip. Now let's use a different clipping boundary. I'm going to click on Polygonal, and it could be useful if in a different case I would like to select this drawing below or the drawing above and not the one in the middle. So, the purpose of using external references is to allow 2 or more people working in the same project. Now, let's suppose I have a specific task in this project. Look to the layer properties. Now they are a bit different as I'm using external references. On the filter section, I can choose which type of layers that I want to display. The layers on gray are from the external references. First you can see the file name and then the layer name. For example, at this moment I have all the layers shown on the screen. Now I switch to the all non-XREF layers, or I can see only the layers from the external reference. So, it's not hard to work with external references, as you can see. But I recommend you to practice a bit to interiorize all these steps that I have been showing to you. Part 5. We are going to discuss here multileaders and the properties panel. Multileaders are an interesting way to add annotations to our drawings. They consist in an arrow that connects to a text or a block with an attribute. Let's have a look to it a bit more in detail. We can add a multileader from the Annotation panel at the Home tab, or if we switch to the Annotation tab, there is a full panel dedicated exclusively to leaders. The first thing I should do is check out the settings by clicking in this arrow here. So it opens a window very identical to the Dimension Style Manager. Let's select the style, the standard one, and modify it. Here I'm going to start with the text height, and because it's too small, I'm going to change it to 250. As my text labels are 350, this will be just a bit smaller. Then on leader format, I want also to change the style of the arrowhead, for example 200. On leader structure, I have by default 2 leader points. Then uncheck the box for landing distance, if I don't want it to be a fixed value. I click on OK to confirm the changes and close the window. So now I can add a leader. It's easy, just click on the multi-leader icon, choose a base point, then specify the leader landing location, and click one time more to type the text. For example, external wall, as it's what the leader indicates. Then change here the layer style to annotative. Nice. This time I'm going to repeat the process, but instead I'm going to add an annotative multileader to appear in this viewport in the scale 1/100. Change here the layer style to annotative, and then on the Multileader Style Manager click on Modify. So I will not change the settings because I think they are quite acceptable. I close the window. Don't forget to make sure the scale is correct, 1/100, and draw the multileader. For example, window. Now if I double click on the arrow, I can see the quick properties of the multileader. For example, let's change the landing distance to 10, and you can see the distance updating automatically. So if I switch to the Layout tab, I can see how the annotative multiline looks like. Multileaders have two types of content, multiline text or a block with an attribute, which it's this example here. Now I'm going to show you how to make this. Go again to the Multileader Style Manager, and here I'm going to create a new style. I select this time Annotative and click on New. So my new style will have the same settings as the annotative style. Choose a name for it, and when I'm ready I click on Continue. On this window we go to Content and change the multileader style to Block. In this list, as you can see, there are already several blocks for multileader that come with Autocad. Apart from this, I can also use a block made by me, but this time let's use this circle. Then I can change the scale, but I'm going to keep it 1. Have in mind that in this kind of multileaders, using a block, we don't specify the height of the text. Then I create a multileader somewhere here, and as the text inside the block is an attribute, I'm asked to insert a value. Let's put 1 for it, and click on OK to confirm this choice. Okay, I don't like too much this position, so let's use the grips to put it a bit here inside. Now it's good, and you can see that it has an acceptable size on the layout. Let's add another multileader, and this time I put 5 for the value. You can see how simple it is. One disadvantage in multileaders: unlike dimension lines, if I change the multileader style settings, the existing objects do not update automatically. So if I decide I want to change the block, I have to draw them again. As you see, I inserted the arrow with the new block. On the next example, I'm going to add a multileader using a standard style, non-annotative. So, if I use the scale 1, it will be too small for the drawings that I have here. I need to increase it. Let's try with 20. Then I close this window. I'm going to draw the leader. And you can see that the block I have here is a bit different. This one has 2 attributes. I just put random values, and now the size fits quite well for this drawing. Have in mind that using the blocks by default in multileaders can be hard to measure exactly. Actually, what happens is, the measurements themselves are defined at the block editor. When I specify the multileader settings, I can just set the scale. Each multileader can have more than one arrow. If I click on Add Leader, then I select the multileader, I can add an extra leader. So this is as simple as it looks, and it's possible to add how many leaders as I want. I could place another from this point, or press Escape to cancel the command. To remove a leader, just click on the icon located below, select first the object, and then click to remove the arrow. Now let's talk a bit more in detail about the properties of objects. You can find an entire panel here. As you can see, there are three main tabs. The first is for the color, the second the line weight, and the third the line type. By default, these settings follow the properties of the layer where the object is. Now, suppose I want to change the color of only a certain object. I click on it, go to the color tab and change it to red, for example. So at this moment the color of the object is not regulated by the layer color. Next situation. Now I have a block. And you will see that they can act a bit different. If I try to change the color, you can see that it doesn't work. And as you remember, we should put the lines that form a block in the layer 0 before creating it. So I'm going to copy this block, and then I use the command explode to return to its original objects. If we want to give more freedom to the block before creating it, we set the color of the objects as by block. Then I convert the door to a block. I finish. And as you can see, it's possible to change the color to follow the layer or choose a specific one like I did before. There are also several ways that I can play with colors in blocks. For example, I can set the color of these two objects to an orange. Then I create the block. And what happens is that when I change the layer, those two objects will always keep the same color. Line weights. I'm going to select this line and change the line weight here to 1 mm. But nothing seems to change. Why? The line weight at the status bar is switched off. So I need to switch it on to see it. If you don't find this icon there, go to the corner, click in these three lines and find it on the list there. Also, look that the weights measure exactly how they are printed. 1 mm, and no matter the scale that we are using. So basically the line weights are annotative. Now I'm going to switch off the icon Show Line Weights. And now even the line looks similar as the others. Also, it's not displayed on the layout. It's still there when you print a project or publish a PDF. Here you have it. And now you can ask, why does not Autocad show the line weights by default? Honestly, I'm not sure about the answer, but I think it's to not have the workspace too messy with different weights of objects, especially if there are lots of them. Basically, it's up to us to decide if we want the line weights or not. Like line weight, there is a similar option to add a thickness, in this case for polylines. I can use the command pedit, it means polyline edit. I select the polyline, and you can see several options to use here. For example, I can turn into a spline or click on the curve to come back to the original polyline, along with other options that you can explore later. If I click on the third option, I can add a width. Then it prompts, specify a new width for all segments. This time, this width value is a real size, like when you draw standard dimensions or standard text. So let's type 50 and the polyline has this new shape. I can still snap to the object snap points, and they are now in the middle, because when we add a width to a polyline, it basically expands to the sides. Extra tip. If I wanted, I could draw a wall just using one polyline with a specific width. For example, let's draw this rectangle with 5 meters per 2 meters. Then I right click, and this is a different way to access the settings that you can find on pedit. I select width and put a thickness of 150. So this could be a wall. However, look what happened here in the corner. It looks like that these joints are not connected. And this is because the polyline is not closed. I open again the right-click menu, and this time on Polyline, I click on Close to have the result that I want. Now let's talk about the remaining setting, the line type. I'm going to select this line, then I click in this tab to select the line type. In this case there was already a dashed line selected, but let's see the others. Then click on Load, and you can find a bunch of line types in this list here. Let's choose this one, click on OK, select it again here. Then it didn't change. I also have to select the line. And now yes, it changes to the one that I want. Now let's go to the properties. There is a parameter very important here, is the line type scale. And we have to play with the numbers to know which range of values we need to put here. Another thing, you can also notice that the current value is 0. Of course, it's not possible to have a scale 0. But the reason of this is, on the unit properties, I have the precision set to no decimals. I'm going to change it to 2 decimals, and you can see that actually the current scale is 0.1. Now let's see how the line type scale works. The smaller it gets, the more difficult it is to see to distinguish the shape. The larger it is more likely to see just a continuous line or zooming into a gap. Let's see another very important tip. It's common that we want the line types to appear in a specific viewport. So, as the viewports are in a specific scale, this one is set as 1/100, we should set up the scale in the model space before choosing the line type. If we do this, the line type will look exactly as it is in the viewport. On the other hand, if my scale is set to 1/1 and choose the same line type, this is the current appearance at the model space, when I switch to a viewport that is scaled differently, 1/100 in this case, I can see that the appearance will not be the same. So it looks like we reached the end of this lesson. For now, I think you have enough material that will keep you practicing at least for some hours. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm sure we will meet next time. See you then!